The Rebbe Zilgazin began the Farbrengen this afternoon that today is Shabbos. It is Shabbos HaGodel and also Shabbos Parshas Acharei, which means there are several inyanim that are combined in one Shabbos, in one inyan. However, each and every one of these inyanim in its own rights stands out for its special chashivos. And immediately went in explaining the Rechagav how each and every one is obligated to say Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, that the world was created because of me. And when Torah tells us that everyone is obligated to have such an approach, though we know there are different divisions amongst Yidden, as the pasuk says, from Chasheichem Shiftechem through Chayte Vetzecha V'Shayev Memecha, it is the Shayev Memecha, the one who is merely only the one who goes and sheps the water, gathers the water. His approach also has to be the same, that Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world and everything that is in the world, all because of Him. Which this shows us how extremely important and chashiv each and every individual, each and every Yid who HaKadosh Baruch Hu created is. And in fact, that is Bereishis. The beginning of the Torah begins with the word Bereishis. So Chazal immediately comment, Bereishis, Shnei Reishis, B'shvil HaTorah shenikras Reishis, and B'shvil Yisrael shenikru Reishis. Why did the Rebbe create the world? Because of these two important people, because of Torah and because of Yidden. Therefore, now that when we have how each and everyone is obligated to say, Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, it is each and every Jew, regardless whether he fits into the criteria of a Chayte Vetzecha V'Shayev Memecha, or his criteria is Chasheichem Shiftechem. And all this stems from the dear and tremendous love which HaKadosh Baruch Hu expresses to each and every Jew. As we know the famous saying from the Baal Shem Tov, that each and every Jew is as dear to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, we're talking about every Jew regardless his spiritual stand, whether he fits into the category of Chasheichem Shiftechem, Chayte Vetzecha V'Shayev Memecha. All of this is irrelevant. Baal Shem Tov expressed themselves that each and every Jew is as dear to Hashem, just like a child that was born, a one and only child that was born to his parents at a very late age. And we know how much parents cherish children in general, but how much more so do parents express a special love to a child when the child was born at a later age to them, and this is their one and only child. The identical love HaKadosh Baruch Hu expresses to each and every Yid. So we see how each and every Yid has a tremendous chashivas, a tremendous importance in his own right, and together with it, he is part of Klal Yisrael. In other words, as an individual, he has a tremendous love which is expressed from the Rabbeinu Shalom to this Yid, and at the same time, each and every Yid is a member of Klal Yisrael. As an example, the Rebbe brought how we find the letters in the Sefer Torah. The letters in the Sefer Torah, each and every letter is a separate letter in itself. To such an extent that al pi halacha we are required that between each and every letter there must be a surrounding of parchment. Every letter has to be mukaf gvil. If there wouldn't be a surrounding of parchment between each of the letters, in other words, should we go ahead and combine two letters without us leaving space in between, then whatever it may be, whether it is a Sefer Torah or Tefillin, mezuzahs, whatever the case may be, it is possible.
What's gvil?
Gvil is cloth, parchment. So there has to be a space between each and every letter, which this in a way shows us how spiritual sense, how each and every Jew stands in his own spiritual stands on his own. Together with it, it is Yesh Shishim Riba Isi Yisla Torah. What is Yisrael? Yisrael is put together that there's 600,000 letters to a Torah. Meaning, when is it a kosher Torah? When it has all of the letters that are in the Torah. So again we see the role which an individual plays. However, an individual plays a role, and together with it, he is part of Klal Yisrael. And the same applies to each and every Yid. After this lengthy introduction, the Rebbe got back to the inyan of Shabbos HaGodel. In general, why is it called Shabbos HaGadol, a great Shabbos? Each and every Shabbos is great. Every Shabbos is great. Child knows that every Shabbos, even a 5-year-old child is well aware, well familiar that every Shabbos is treated very special, to the extent that there are special foods prepared for each and every Shabbos. What makes Shabbos HaGadol so outstanding? So if we look into the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, we find the Alter Rebbe tells us what is the original source of Shabbos HaGadol. That originally what has transpired on this day is that this was the day when it was Lamakem Mitzrayim B'Fcheireim, when the Yidden were still in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, and each and every one prepared the Korban Pesach, and the Egyptians began seeing what was going on. So a revolution broke out amongst the Mitzrayim themselves. Lamakem Mitzrayim B'Fcheireim. The Pcheirim, the firstborns of the Mitzrayim, and the rest of the Mitzrayim engaged in a battle, in a war, because the Pcheirim were already aware that if Paro would not let the Yidden go out, each and every firstborn in every home would die. So they began insisting that the Pcheirim that Klal Yisrael be released. The Mitzrayim did not agree to that. So this broke out to a war, Lamakem Mitzrayim B'Fcheireim. The Pcheirim amongst themselves began a war. This is the original source of Shabbos HaGadol. As Alter Rebbe explains in Shulchan Aruch, that on that year, Shabbos HaGadol fell out 10 days in the month of Nisan, and that is when it began the Lamakem Mitzrayim B'Fcheireim, and afterwards it is every Shabbos before Pesach, the Shabbos is referred to as Shabbos HaGadol. Rebbe referred to a custom, which was a custom in many Jewish communities, that on Shabbos HaGadol, a special kugel was made. And the kugel was made from matzah mel, from Pesach dik and matzah mel. However, being that the house was still not Pesach dik, they would make sure that the entire kugel would be finished before Erev Pesach, in other words, before the time when we are prohibited to eat chametz. But again, the Rebbe is raising the question, what really makes Shabbos HaGadol so special? That just because there was a Makem Mitzrayim B'Fcheireim, we refer to this Shabbos as a Shabbos HaGadol. Basically, what the Rebbe Zilgazuntan explained was that we refer to Lamakem Mitzrayim B'Fcheireim Ki Lo Ilam Chazdei. In other words, we say it in Tillim, we say it in Davening, that it all stems from the Chesed of Hashem, from the source of kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is why he led to this inner revolution, this inner war between the Pcheirim Mitzrayim, the firstborns in Egypt, and the Mitzrayim. Because this shows us what we are usually used to. We are attuned to realize that there are many inyanim we get from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we get it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore we are thankful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for these inyanim. However, to realize that in the inyan of Lamakem Mitzrayim B'Fcheireim, Pcheirim usually are the firstborns, the older ones, which just in a sense resembles the stronger ones in Mitzrayim. And to say that Lamakem Mitzrayim B'Fcheireim, this is to such an extent, this inyan is also led by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is something which we are alerted on this Shabbos. In other words, Shabbos HaGadol teaches us that inyanim which we may think have no shaychus to Kedusha, have no shaychus to the Rebbeinu Shalom, have not led by the Rebbeinu Shalom in any way. There are inyanim which we know, our parnassas, our daily routine things, we know we are constantly thankful to the Rebbeinu Shalom for it. However, to realize that there is a Yad Hashem and the fact of Lamakem Mitzrayim B'Fcheireim, the Mitzrayim and the firstborns in Mitzrayim, they are engaged in a battle amongst themselves. So we should sit back for a minute and realize that this is led by HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. This is what Shabbos HaGadol teaches us. So this is the lesson what we derive from Shabbos HaGadol. In fact, this is why it's called Gadol, because it does teach us an Inyan Gadol. It teaches us, introduces us into a new area, that in Yanim, which obviously we may think have no shaychus to Kedusha, in Yanim, which we look are totally secular, have no connection to any Inyan in Kedusha. This shows us that even these in Yanim as well, Lamakem Mitzrayim B'Fcheireim, is also Kilo Elam Chasda. It stems all from the Chesed of Hashem. Today is 12 days in the month of Nisan. And as the custom is, that from the first day in the month of Nisan, from the first day on, we recite the Nasi, which tells us that when the Mishkan was dedicated, each and every Nasi of every tribe brought a korban on that day. Today is the Nasi L'Shevet Naftali. We notice special in Yonim in the first day, in Rosh Chodesh, as well as special in Yonim, outstanding in Yonim, that it transpired in the last day. In the first day, something very special happened. If we look into the Parsha which we recite on the first day of Nisan, we will realize that not only was there a korban brought by Nachshon ben Aminadav, who was the first one of the Nesiim that brought the korban for the Chanukas HaMishkan, but there was a korban brought which came as a contribution from all of the Nesiim together. Sheish Egloi Sov, the pasuk tells us, and Baka. There was a special contribution which was made by all of them jointly, which this is a tremendous thing. This is an inyan of the Hiskalalus, how each one of all the Shvatim joined in together. In other words, this is a representation of all of Klal Yisrael. All of Klal Yisrael was represented in this gift which was given by all of the Nesiim. On the last day, which is today, 12 days in the month of Nisan, we find the Torah tells us in detail about the korban of Naphtali. Simultaneously, the Torah also tells us all the total of all the contributions which was gathered throughout all the 12 days. In other words, the Karbanos, Kesef, the Mizrikais, all the detailed inyanim which each and every Nasi brought, the total is what we talk about today. So it's also a special day, a special inyan, because it spells out the hiskalalus, the unity, the total which comes as a result of the unity of all of the Karbanos which were brought by all the Shvat. However, the Rebbe says, it seems that there's more specialty in the hiskalalus, in the unity of 12 days in the month of Nisan, as opposed to the inyan which they brought Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Why? Because the contribution which was made on Rosh Chodesh Nisan was something which was merely only a hachoneh, something which came as a preparation. Because if we look into the details, what exactly they brought inyanim which were not handy immediately. They brought inyanim. Excuse me, there's a sitter around. Sorry. The inyanim which were brought by all the Nesiim was Sheish Egloi Sav, Ushnei Asabaka, Agol al Shnei Nesiim, Visher La'echad. In other words, what they really brought, they prepared that there should be what should carry all of these inyanim. In other words, they prepared the wagons which were used later. If we look into Chumash, when was the next traveling that these wagons were put to use? We will find that it took over a year. Next year of Iyar, I don't quote exactly the pasuk, it was next year of Iyar when all of these agolas were put to use. So really what they brought was something which wasn't usable immediately. They brought something which came as a preparation, as a hachoneh, that when it will be needed, it will be used. However, what we're talking about in 12 days in Nisan, first we recite the Nasi of Naphtali. Afterwards we go into a detail, total of all the inyanim which were brought, all the karbanos, all the kapos, and all the mizrikos, and everything, all the kvasim, everything which was brought throughout the 12 days. And this is a total which expresses the hiskalalus of all of the shvatim. The emes is that the question is raised in Sfarim, and it's raised in Chasidus, and discussed in Chasidus. Why is there a need for the Torah to repeat in detail each and every one of the karbanos? If all the karbanos were identical, and they were, so the Torah could have merely said that the Yom HaSheni brought exactly the same which the Yom HaRishon brought. And the same for all the 12 days, that it was an exact repeat, each day, what the previous day, the Nasi of the previous day brought, back to the very first one. However, it's explained in Hasidus that true, physically, all the karbanos were the same. However, in the spiritual sense, a korban comes along with all the kavanas. Each and every korban represented an entire different inyan of kavanah. And therefore the Torah cannot limit itself to say that the next day was the identical korban, it may have been identical in the sense of the physical korban. However, the kavanas that came, the intention and all the intentions and all the kavanas and all the yechudim and all the spiritual accomplishments which came as a result of the korbanos, this was totally different each and every day. And that is why the Torah does have to repeat every day all the detailed korbanos, because here the Torah shows us that physically it may have been the same, materially it was the same. However, in sense of the kavanas and the yechudim which were accomplished throughout bringing the korbanos, they were totally different. And it's brought in Sfarim that the korban of Naphtali, which is today, 12 days in the month of Nisan, this is a korban that has a shaykhs to the inyan of Avos and Imahis. This has a shaykhs to the schus of our ancestors. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. Here the Rebbe mentioned Derech Agav. In other words, being that we're talking about the Avos and the Imahis, we usually have an often quote, "En koirin Avos ela l'shloisha." Whom do we look at as our Avos, as our ancestors? 3. Which 3? Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Shvatim, the tribes. Each and every Jew is a descendant of a different tribe. However, we all are descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It comes to Imahis, to the matriarchs. Here we usually are used to the idea that we had 4. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. So the Rebbe pointed out that really there are 3 of the Imahis as well. Because every Yid is either a descendant of Rachel or a descendant of Leah. So we usually have an expression, there are 4 Imahis. 4 Imahis are who? Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, because Bilhah and Zilpah are not credited, because each one of them is bottled, one to Rachel and one to Leah. However, in the sense, when we count Imahis, we are usually under the impression that we count 4 Imahis. The Rebbe says, really, we count them as 4, but it is the same as Avos. Is ein koiren Avos ela shloisha. So to each and every Yid, Imahis are also the same, only shloisha. It is Sarah, Rivke, then either Rachel or Leah, depending on each and every Yid. One may be a descendant of Rachel, one may be a descendant of Leah. So this has been a geya the korban of Shevet Naphtali, and which has a shaykhs to the Avos and the Imahis. We brought in Svarim, the Rebbe tells us in Tanya, how each and every one of the Avos was in a bottle b'metzias, was in a totally dedicated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And here the Rebbe went into explaining the Inyan al Chassidus. Different Chassidus explains the Inyan of Bittul b'metzias and Bittul Hayesh, which just has various levels of one being dedicated to Hashem. The Rebbe quoted a story, an episode, of a chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, who was extremely poor. The Tzemach Tzedek was aware of it, and therefore the Tzemach Tzedek sent him all his needs, all his Pesach needs. An emissary came into this individual chassid and brought him matzahs, and brought him wine, and brought him maror, and brought him all the inyanim which are needed, which one needs for Pesach. And when did this happen? This happened on an Erev Pesach. The chassid was sitting Erev Pesach, deeply involved in an inyan in Chassidus. And here an emissary from the Rebbe comes and brings him all the tzorchei hachag, whatever he will need for Yontif. The chassid asks the emissary, "What is this? What are you bringing me?" He says, "The Rebbe sent me with this." Chassid hears. Get something from the Rebbe? Didn't think twice, and immediately began eating, washed the matzah, drank the wine, and everything else that was in it. He used it up. If the Rebbe sends him something, he put it to use right away. Erev Pesach passed, comes at night. Chassid Nebuch doesn't have anything. He doesn't have any wine left. He doesn't have any matzahs left. The Chassid goes to the Tzemach Tzedek, and he says, "Rebbe, provide me with my needs for Pesach." Tzemach Tzedek was a little bit surprised. What has happened here? He was well aware that there were a group of Chassidim who were physically or materially in need of his assistance, and he provided them with all their needs. And Tzemach Tzedek began investigating what happened, and he hears that this chassid got just like everybody else got. He began questioning him. He says, yes, I got it, but I was told that it's from the Tzemach Tzedek, so I immediately used it up. In fact, it helped me. Chassid repeats it as Tzemach Tzedek. It helped him very much. It gave him a much better understanding in this Inyan Chassidus, which he was involved in at the time, being that he got something from the Tzemach Tzedek. This made him lichtig, made him purified his mind that the Inyanim which he was involved in, he was able to understand yet better. Tzemach Tzedek realized the situation, so he immediately ordered complete new, all the Inyanim, the wine and the matzahs and all the other things that come along, say the requirements, that it should be brought over to the Chassid. The Rebbe explained this. This shows us how the Chassid was, in a sense, he was like totally elevated and totally in a bittul b'mitzias. He did not feel himself, did not have any of his own feelings, and therefore was not to such an extent that he wasn't even realizing that it was Erev Pesach in the afternoon. And here we are confronted also with a halacha shayla. Erev Pesach, we're not allowed to eat no matzah, we're not allowed to drink no wine. So how was he allowed to do that? So Alpi halacha, Alpi nigla, the Rebbe explains that if one is in the position of his alphos, if one faints, then it is perfectly okay. This chassid at that time was really in a much higher level. He was in a level which can be compared to a hisalphos, to a fachalashung, one being in a fainting spell. And therefore, Alpi halacha, there was nothing wrong in him drinking the wine and eating the matzah. In the spiritual sense as well, he was also totally elevated and totally in a level of bittul b'mitzios, where he did not feel himself at all, and therefore he looked at it that this was something which was able to help him understand better the Inyanim Chassidus which he was involved in at the time. However, as the Rebbe concluded the Sikha, being that every episode which reaches us and every Inyan which reaches us, we have to take a hirah, we have to derive a lesson of Avodas Hashem from it, and over here it's the same. Each and every one of us gets tasks from the Rabbeim. We get our shlichus in which we are supposed to fulfill. And just like this chassid did not wait, did not postpone, did not push off, but when we get a task from the Rebbe, anything which is involving an inyan of matzah reflects amunah, we know, as Chassidus stresses. Matzah is an inyan of michla d'mehemnusa, it's a meichel that brings amunah. What we are supposed to do is not postpone and act on it right away, act on things immediately, fulfill our shlichus as soon as the inyan reaches us, whether it's an inyan of miftzayim, and here the Rebbe spoke about each one of the miftzayim, and we have to act on them right away. This is also a shlichus which is brought to us from the Rabbeim, and we have to seek to fulfill our share and do it immediately without any postponing, without any pushing off. And by doing all this, the Rebbe concluded the Sikha with the expression that this will lead ultimately to, there's a Russian expression which the Rebbe refers to often, daloi golas, which means no more golas, we will go out of golas through Mashiach Tzidkenu. Later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe referred to a Rashi in this week's Sedra, as well as a few other inyanim, which the Rebbe commented on inyanim which were discussed in the Ha'aras Hatmimim, which are the various publications which are published throughout the various yeshivas, where there is controversy, discussion going on, various pshatim, and learning pshat and siches and inyanim chassidus. Firstly, with one question raised there, the Rebbe usually refers to an expression in the Rambam. The Rambam says, "Hey, Hifticha Torah, Kadosh Baruch was pledged us that Yisrael is in tshuva miyad hein negolim. That should Yidden do tshuva, all of Klal Yisrael, we are immediately released from galus." And as the Rebbe keeps on stressing that the expression miyad really means immediately, right away. It seems like somebody raised the question that we find in halacha that the expression of miyad does not exactly mean right away. Miyad taka means soon, but it could mean soon, and it doesn't mean immediately. And to strengthen this question, I don't know if the individual brought this, or the one who asked the question, or the Rebbe just brought it in the Farbrengen, there's an expression in the Geras HaTshuva, in the Alter Rebbe, where the Alter Rebbe expresses himself miyad, which means miyad, mamish. So here again we see that miyad in itself is not such a strong immediate expression, and that is why the Alter Rebbe has to add on the word mamish. Because if miyad would really mean immediately, then there wouldn't be any need for the Alter Rebbe to add on the word mamish. However, the Rebbe says, b'negei this in you, we have to look into the Rambam. Rambam tells us, in the same Perek, where the Rambam expresses himself, Hifticha Torah, that the Torah has promised, pledged, that Yisroel lois in Tshuva, miyad hein nigolen. The Rambam there discusses the greatness of a Baal Tshuva. And the Rambam refers with the expression of the Kadosh Baruch Hu has promised that if a Baal Tshuva turns to him, terem yikro vani ene. Before he even has a chance to turn, it's an expression in the pasuk, HaKadosh Baruch Hu commits himself to respond. So we see here that the Rambam is talking about this in Halacha Seif, the Yad HaChazak of the Rambam. So he says, Rabbi says, where the Rambam is quoting the pasuk, terem yikro vani ene, we cannot say that here the Rambam is referring to a spiritual level, that there will be a spiritual response, terem yikro. The Rambam here is talking Halacha. And Halacha, when we use the expression, quotation of the pasuk, terem yikro vani ene, it means fullest sense of immediate response. Therefore, if in the same Perek, where the Rambam is also using the expression, Hifticha Torah, that Yisrael lois in Tshuva, miyad hein nigolen. Here, lahalacha, the Rambam does not mean a miyad as miyad may apply in other areas in Shas, and it does not mean immediately, but it could mean soon or closely. Here, the Rambam definitely means that it will happen immediately. B'negei the Rashi in this week's Sedra, it's a pasuk in Parshas Acharei, which is today's Sedra, but the pasuk expresses himself, B'zois yavai Aaron el HaKodesh. It is with this, right away at the beginning of the Sedra, Kapitel Tes Zayin, pasuk Gimel. It is with this that Aaron will come el HaKodesh. Rashi comments that the word B'zois has a numeric value, Gematria. Gematria shaloi, Daled Meis ve'esa. The word B'zois totals 410. Remez L'bayis Rishon. This is an indication to the first Beis HaMikdash, because the first Beis HaMikdash lasted for 410 years. Rebbe says, many years ago this Rashi was already discussed, but it can be discussed again. Question here is very obvious. Rashi, whose inyan is Pshutei Shel Mikra, usually refrains from getting involved in Gematriyos. If Rashi, for some reason, does get involved in the Gematria, Rashi explains why. Another famous place where Rashi gets involved in the Gematria is the Chumash Bereishis, where the pasuk uses the expression Redu when Yaakov went down to Mitzrayim. So there Rashi immediately comments that Redu is also the Gematria 210. This is a shaykhus to the 210 years which the Yidden were in Mitzrayim. However, here, Rashi does not give any indication why he has to get involved in the Gematria. And in Pshutei Shel Mikra, we could learn the Pshutei Shel Mikra very simple, without getting involved in the Gematria. So it seems that Rashi is really troubled, the Rebbe says, with the word Bezois. Pasuk could have expressed itself either Be'elu Yavayaran ala Kodesh, or yet more, the entire word is extra. There was no need for a Bezois, there's no need for a Be'elu. The Pasuk should have said, Yavayaran ala Kodesh, Hasher Aaron come ala Kodesh, Be'pa, Ben Bok ala Chatas v'ayeloi. So from here, we immediately see that the word Bezois is extra. If the word Bezois is extra, that is why Rashi in Pshutei Shel Mikra begins searching, why does the Torah say the word Bezois? So that is why Rashi comes to a conclusion that the word Bezois has a Gematria. The Gematria is 410, which just has a shaykhus to the Bayis Rishon. But again, the child here is learning Chumash. Why does the child have to get involved with the number of years the Bayis Rishon existed? I mean, what shaykhus does it have for us while we are learning these psukim here? So, and all of this must be explained out of the Rashis in this Sedra, so that the child who's learning the Chumash the Chumash and the Rashi should have everything clear beforehand. However, there is a Rashi Vaita in this Sedre where Rashi indicates in Pasuk Lamed Beis of the same capital. Rashi indicates Vashi Yamala Yes Yodai. We're talking about the Shemen HaMishcha, the special oil which they had in the Mishkan, the Beis HaMikdash. So Rashi says that it was used for the Kohanim Gedolim until Yeshayahu, because it was in the days of Yeshayahu, which was towards the end of the Bayis Rishon, Nignezat Tzloiches Shel Shemen HaMishcha. That is when the Tzloiches of the Shemen HaMishcha, the little jar which had the special oil, was hidden. So already we see that there's some sort of an indication that there are inyanim which were in the first Beis HaMikdash and were not in the second. As we see, the Shemen HaMishcha towards the end of the second Beis HaMikdash, it was towards the end of the first Beis HaMikdash, it was nignas. So therefore, Rashi does feel compulsory, as an introduction to this Sedre, Bezois Yavayarim, to right away tell us that there are inyanim which were only going on in the first Beis HaMikdash and not in the second. So that's why Rashi says Bezois is a remes for the first. The first Beis HaMikdash lasted for 410 years. However, we shall know that there are inyanim which Yavayarim ala Kodesh only in the Bezois and in the second Beis HaMikdash, which was after the 410 years. These inyanim were not there. So again, we see how everything in Rashi is accurate. When I get the Zohar in this week's Sedre, the comments of the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, the Rebbe quoted a Zohar, which the Zohar tells us that the reason we read on Yom Kippur, the Parsha of Achimois, which also tells us about the passing of Nadav Avihu, is because that the forgiveness which all of Klal Yisrael get on Yom Kippur is in the merit of Nadav Avihu, the schus of Nadav Avihu. The Rebbe also quoted that there is a Medrash or Teres Kohanim, I don't recall, which tells us that Nadav Avihu were even greater than Elazar and Yisama, their brothers, who remained alive. So the question arises, we're talking about Nadav Avihu, who HaKadosh Baruch Hu took away from this world. How can we say that the forgiveness which is given to all of Klal Yisrael, each and every Yom Kippur, isn't their schus? Chazal tell us that one of the reasons why HaKadosh Baruch Hu took them away was, why were they punished? Because Shtuye Yayin Nichnasu LaMikdash, they went into the Beis HaMikdash, Shtuye Yayin, they drank intoxicating liquors. And afterwards they walked into the Mishkan. So we say that in their merit, the forgiveness which is given on this single out day of forgiveness, Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a day which, the day of such a special day, the forgiveness of this day is in the merit of Nadav Avihu. Rabbi explained that when Nadav Avihu was Shtuya Yayin Nichnasu LaMikdash, this was before the Isser of Yayin V'Sheicher Al Teisht. The Isser which prohibits one to enter the Mishkan HaMikdash after drinking intoxicating drinks, this came after the incident of Nadav Avihu. So actually when Nadav Avihu did it, they were not over on an Isser against the Torah, where the Torah tells us that there's an Isser for a Shosu Yayin to enter the Mikdash, or the Mishkan. And therefore, they themselves, as Chassidus explains, they in themselves were at a tremendous high spiritual level. And that is why Takir, there's a Chazal that says that Nadav Avihu were yet greater than Elazar and Yisama. And at the same time, Nadav Avihu, the Zohar HaKadosh tells us that the forgiveness which is given to all of Klal Yisrael for all the thousands of years there and after, for all the generations, is all in the schus of Nadav Avihu. Because, in other words, it seems like that lahalacha mitzad halacha, they did not do anything wrong. I'm using my own expression. The fact that shtuya yayin nichnas lamitish, in other words, the Isser was not in existence yet. Why they were punished? Maybe they should have understood on their own or whatever. But as far as to say that they were even an Isser HaTorah, where the Torah says Yayin V'Sheicher Al Teisht when you walk into the Mikdash and Mishkan, and they did, this is nicht this was not the case. Because the Isser came as a result of them entering the Mishkan Shtuya Yayin. The Rebbe Zalman saying raised in the afternoon's Farbrengen was regarding the printing of the Tanyas, the Rebbe has been talking about lately, the great inyan that in every Jewish community, every Jewish city, every Jewish country, wherever Yidden live, it is of tremendous importance that a Tanya be printed there and naturally be learned there and be kept there. And it was in the Yud Aleph Nisan Dike Farbrengen, where in the most recent edition of the Tanya, which this is the 1000th edition of the Tanya, as the Rebbe explained Yud Aleph Nisan. This edition was distributed, was given out, b'shlichus of the Rebbe soll gesund sein, to all of us, to each and every one of us at the Yud Aleph Nisan Dike Farbrengen. What the Rebbe suggested today was, being that there are still cities and Jewish communities where the Tanya was not printed yet, it is still time to chaparein, and being that we're now in the days of Pesach, we know that Pesach always has an extension. The extension to Pesach is Pesach Sheni, especially based on the famous quotation, what the moral of Pesach Sheni is, as is Kemel Nishtaka Fafaun, famous quotation from the Rabbeim, which means that it is really never too late. So we still have a month to get involved and see to it that if there are any Jewish communities, cities, countries, states where the Tanya was not printed yet, to see to it that the Tanya should be printed. And also the Rabbi added on, being that this Tanya, which was printed for Yud Aleph Nisan, the 1000th edition of the Tanya, has in it a copy, the front cover of each and every Tanya. An addition will be made, after all these Tanyas will be printed, an addition to this Tanya will be made, whereby all the additional covers will be inserted, which this will come as a hashlama to this 1000th edition of the Tanya. That he didn't say. Towards the end of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe referred to the Chazal, Mefakchin al tzorchei tzibur b'Shabbos, where on Shabbos we're allowed to take care of public needs. And therefore, we still have 2 days left to Pesach, and these inyanim that have to be taken care of to help Yidden for Pesach, to see to it that everybody has all their needs to be able to celebrate a joyous and kosher Pesach. And even those inyanim that cannot be taken care of until Pesach, there are many inyanim that can be taken care of during Pesach, whatever we cannot chaparein before Pesach, and to see to it that everybody should be able to observe a proper Pesach according to halacha, and each and every Yid should be able to have a kosher mefchelach on Pesach. It is our obligation to see to it and chaparein, the leftover time until Pesach, to see to it that those whom we think may need any assistance for Pesach, to be able to observe and celebrate a real freilich and joyous Pesach, it is our obligation to see to it that they shall be able to do so. A gute Woche and a kosher and freilich on Pesach.